July night in 1977, Memphis was steeped in an atmosphere thick with anticipation. Inside the Memphis Coliseum, every seat was taken, with extra chairs added to satisfy the nearly 20,000 fans desperate to see Elvis Presley. They had come from every corner of the country. Cars in the parking lot bore license plates from dozens of states. Some families drove thousands of miles. Some spent their entire savings just to witness the king of rock and roll in his hometown. For many, tonight was more than a concert. It was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. Amid this ocean of humanity was Sarah Mitchell, a single mother and nurse from a small rural Tennessee town, and her 5-year-old daughter Amy. They had saved for months to buy tickets. Sarah wanted to give her daughter a special summer gift, a chance to see the man from the records Amy sang along to every night. Amy, with her curly golden hair and sparkling blue eyes, had long seen Elvis as a figure from a fairy tale. She sang "Love Me Tender" and "Can't Help Falling in Love" before she even knew how to write. This trip to Memphis, for Amy, was nothing short of a pilgrimage to meet her idol. They made the 3-hour journey in Sarah's old sedan, stopping at roadside diners and singing Elvis songs from the worn-out radio. Amy wore a pink dress with white flowers, lovingly sewn by her grandmother, and clutched a small handmade sign scrawled with heartfelt care, "Amy loves Elvis." As they approached the Coliseum, Amy pressed her face against the window, eyes wide at the torrent of people flowing toward a single point. She had never seen a crowd this big. The hum of voices, the footsteps, the laughter, it was thrilling and overwhelming all at once, especially for a child used to the quiet rhythms of the countryside. But the excitement soon turned into a challenge. The crowd was bigger than Sarah expected. People pressed in from all directions, their voices overpowering the loudspeakers. Amy tried to stay close, but her small frame disappeared easily among the adults. Sarah gripped her daughter's hand tightly, weaving through the throng, constantly checking that Amy was still beside her. Once inside, Amy's senses were instantly bombarded. The hum of chatter, the smell of food, the sound of instruments tuning. The seating areas were dimly lit, but near the stage, lights blazed like another world. Amy clutched her mother's hand tighter, feeling both the rush of excitement and a flicker of unease. Their seats were in the general admission section, fairly close to the stage, but requiring them to squeeze past several rows. Sarah apologized repeatedly, while Amy shrank herself to avoid disturbing anyone. She swung her legs, asking over and over, "When will Elvis come out?" Her gaze fixed on the stage. But as the wait dragged on, Amy began to fidget. The noise grew louder, the lights shifted constantly, and the crowd around them buzzed with excitement. Seeing her daughter's discomfort, Sarah suggested, "Let's take a quick trip to the restroom and come right back. We'll make it in time." They left their seats unaware that this short errand would mark the beginning of a nightmare. Sarah held Amy's hand as they navigated the narrow hallway toward the restrooms. The dim yellow glow from old light bulbs made the air feel even more suffocating. They weaved past dozens of people waiting in line for snacks and drinks. Voices called out. Soda cans popped open. Footsteps slapped against the concrete floor in a chaotic symphony. Amy tried to keep up, but her tiny legs tangled with the long strides of adults, blocked by purses and trays of food. In a single distracted moment, just a blink, Sarah turned her head to avoid a tray of popcorn, and when she looked back, Amy's small hand had slipped away. Sarah instantly bent down, scanning the moving stream of bodies. "Amy, Amy." Her voice cracked, barely audible over the noise. Amy was only a few steps away, but the towering figures around her blocked her mother's view. She called out, "Mommy," but the sound was swallowed by the stage's sound check and chatter. Fear crept into her wide, innocent eyes. Stage lights flickered in the distance like wavering flames. But to Amy, everything blurred. She was swept along with the crowd, stumbling, her little arms reaching out for something, anything to hold on to. Sarah pushed forward desperately, but with each passing second, the gap seemed to stretch farther. Sweat beaded on Sarah's forehead, her heart pounding in her chest. Dark thoughts rushed in news stories of lost children, of endings that never came whole. She knew she could not let that happen. Amy eventually stopped near the souvenir stand. Her eyes darted frantically, lips trembling, tears beginning to fall. A shop attendant bent down and asked, "Who are you here with?" But Amy only shook her head. Unable to speak through her sobs, she clutched her little sign, "Amy loves Elvis," to her chest, as if it were the last thread connecting her to safety. Not far away, Sarah's voice grew hoarse as she called her daughter's name over and over. She pushed through lines of people making their way toward the stage. The panic turned the world into a downpour of chaotic images and sounds. Somewhere backstage, Elvis was ready for his opening act, unaware that among the sea of eager fans, a 5-year-old girl was crying for her mother. The opening music filled the arena. The curtain began to part, and warm white light spilled forward, cutting through the darkness of the crowd. Elvis stepped out in a white sequined jumpsuit, his stride steady, yet his eyes seemed to scan the audience as if searching for something beyond the set list, while the sea of fans screamed and waved. Near the souvenir stand, a little girl stood frozen, clutching a sign that read, "Amy loves Elvis." Her wide eyes glistened, reflecting thousands of flickering lights. A security guard on patrol noticed her. He bent down and asked softly, "Are you lost, sweetheart?" Amy gave a small nod, her lips trembling. Her voice was so faint that the music from the stage swallowed nearly every word. The guard looked around quickly, then took her hand and began guiding her through the crowd. Up ahead, Sarah was still shouting her daughter's name through the chaos. Her eyes suddenly caught sight of that small, familiar figure, and her heart nearly stopped. She rushed forward, tears streaming, wrapping Amy in her arms. Feeling the warmth she had almost lost forever, the sight caught the attention of a stagehand. Within moments, the story reached the ear of Joe Esposito, Elvis's closest road manager. When Joe leaned in to whisper the details to him, Elvis's expression shifted. The dazzling stage presence softened into something else, gentle, intent, deeply human. He kept singing, but the words seemed slower now, as though they were meant for someone specific in the far-off crowd. As he moved toward the left side of the stage, his eyes landed squarely on that white sign with bold red letters in Amy's arms. He paused, squinted, and then smiled. No one in the audience knew that just seconds later, Elvis would do something no set list had planned for. A moment was about to unfold, one powerful enough to turn the entire concert into an eternal memory. Elvis took a deep breath, as if trying to steady his heartbeat before doing something out of the ordinary. The band kept playing behind him, but he had stopped singing. His eyes no longer scanned the roaring sea of fans. They were fixed on a single spot in the stands, where a little girl clutched a white sign and a mother's tears still glistened under the lights. The entire arena seemed to slow down. The cheers faded into murmurs of curiosity. No one knew what was happening. A few spotlights followed Elvis's gaze, landing on Amy. In that moment, the air felt tight, and for a few seconds, tens of thousands of people seemed to hold their breath together. Elvis stepped to the very edge of the stage, shielding his eyes with one hand to see past the blinding lights. His voice came low and warm, but laced with emotion. "What's your name?" "Little one." Amy looked up, hesitant at first, then spoke loudly enough for the microphone to catch. "Amy, I love you." "Elvis, Those few words melted the entire atmosphere. Elvis nodded slightly, pressing his lips together as if holding back a swell of emotion. He motioned to his security team. Joe Esposito understood instantly. Moments later, Amy and her mother were escorted closer, to the front row right beneath the stage. Elvis knelt, reaching out his hand toward Amy. She stepped forward, her tiny hand fitting perfectly into his. The stage lights suddenly narrowed, wrapping the two of them, a legend and a little girl reunited with her mother in a warm, golden circle. Elvis leaned down, whispering something into Amy's ear. No one could hear what he said, but the radiant smile on her face said it all. That moment had never been in the set list, but it turned the concert into a story that every witness would carry for the rest of their lives. Elvis still held that tiny hand as he stood up, but instead of returning to the waiting music, he gently passed the microphone to an assistant. The entire arena fell silent. Every small breath, every rustle of a seat seemed to be drawn into one single point, the moment between a man and a little girl he had never met before. He stepped down a few stairs from the stage, drawing Amy closer, then gently lifted her into his arms. In the bright stage lights, you could see the fatigue yet glowing happiness on her face. The audience was no longer a sea of strangers. They had become witnesses to something miraculous. Elvis turned to the band, giving a slight nod. The guitar began to play softly, like a whispered secret. He sat down on a stool at the edge of the stage, Amy in his arms, her head resting against his shoulder. "This song isn't for everyone tonight," Elvis said quietly, his voice trembling. "It's just for one special little girl, and for the mother who waited for this moment." Then he began to sing. No microphone, no noisy, no flashing lights, only a deep, raw voice, mingling with the quickened breaths of a little girl trembling with emotion. Every note seemed to strike directly at the hearts of tens of thousands. Many lowered their heads, quietly wiping away tears. Fathers tightened their grip on their children's hands. Mothers leaned gently against their husbands, eyes distant. No one spoke a word, because they knew they were witnessing something beyond music, a moment of pure human connection. When the song ended, Elvis didn't stand right away. He held Amy a little tighter, whispering something that made her eyes shine with newfound belief. Then, he returned her to her mother's arms. As the arena erupted in a long, deep applause, not the usual roar of a concert, but something far more reverent. After placing Amy back into her mother's arms, Elvis stepped back, his eyes still fixed on that small figure, as if afraid the magic would disappear if he blinked. He began to walk toward the stage, but suddenly stopped. The entire arena held its breath. He turned back, knelt before Amy, and whispered something that made her giggle, a rare sound her mother likely hadn't heard in a long time. Then, in a completely unexpected gesture, Elvis opened his arms and invited both mother and daughter onto the stage. The crowd let out a surprised cheer, which quickly softened into reverent silence. Another moment was beginning. As Amy stepped onto the stage, the lights dimmed, the music fell silent, and every eye turned toward her. Elvis knelt to her eye level, gently placing a white silk scarf, the kind he wore at every show, into her hands. "This is so. You'll remember that tonight, you weren't just part of the audience, you were part of the show." The little girl clutched the scarf, as if holding on to both the warmth and the promise it carried. Elvis turned to the crowd, his deep voice resonating. "Can we sing something softly, not to perform, but to give just to this little girl?" The arena paused for a heartbeat. Then tens of thousands of voices blended together, rising like a gentle breeze. Amy lifted her gaze, her eyes shimmering, looking at all the unfamiliar faces singing for her. In that moment, every barrier of age, illness, and distance disappeared. Only love remained pure, simple, and unconditional. When the song ended, Elvis didn't rush off stage. He bent down and held Amy for a long time, as if trying to imprint her warmth deep into his memory. The audience remained still, no loud cheers, no roaring applause as usual. Instead, there was a sacred silence, the kind that holds 1,000 unspoken words. Elvis handed Amy back to her mother. But before leaving, the little girl did something no one expected. She took off her tiny knitted cap, covering her thin hair, and placed it on Elvis's head. "So you'll remember me," Amy whispered. The entire hall choked back tears. Elvis hugged her one last time, and when he stood, he kept the cap on his head. For the rest of the performance, every song, every note, felt like a prayer for Amy. They say that after that night, Elvis kept that cap for the rest of his life. It was found in his bedroom at Graceland after he passed away, resting beside photos of Amy and letters from her family. But perhaps that moment didn't just change Elvis. The tens of thousands who were there that night, and even those who hear this story years later, all come to realize one thing sometimes. Music isn't just for entertainment. It's a thread that connects hearts, the only magic strong enough to make a gravely ill child smile and to bring tears to the eyes of a legendary star.